I saw what I saw!
I saw what I saw, but no one believes me.
Many of us plan to live long, healthy, and stable lives. We do our best to map everything out, hoping to increase our odds at surviving the many challenges that life brings. Some of us may choose to serve our country or others in hopes of simplifying things, and perhaps doing some good along the way. Now imagine choosing the path in life that you believed would simplify things, but instead of getting simpler, life had become complicated in ways that you could never have dreamed up. This is Terry Lovelace's story. Welcome to part 1 of Us and Them.
The Whiteman Air Force Base in western Missouri. I was 22, just been married a year or so, no children yet. Living on the base, as was my coworker, Toby. We were EMTs, drove an ambulance. We worked the night shift. The phone rang, we'd pick it up, and it'd be heart attack, a plane coming down that might crash or did crash, car wrecks, people beat up because they beat up one another after the NCO club closed, intoxicated people. That was what we did. Yeah, I had no problems in the Air Force. Life was good. I believe it was an uncle that suggested that I join the military because I had all these leaflets. I was looking at colleges. I wanted to go to college. You got the GI Bill, you go, you serve a few years, get out. I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was probably about 7. And that was really due to watching the television series, Perry Mason. It looked like a cool way to work. My dad came home dirty and tired at the end of the day. Perry Mason didn't. It's kind of why I wanted to be a medic. I didn't want to carry a gun. I wanted to do something of service. I thought that was the best way for me to do it. The Vietnam War was winding down. There was virtually no chance I'd go, to Vietnam. My folks, but for the most part, I think they were happy with the decision I made. Shepherd Air Force Base in North Texas. It was a cram course, about 3 months, designed to give you a broad understanding of human anatomy and physiology, sterile technique in war. At the end of our training, the guy that's handing out the assignments, First Sergeant says, "Lovelace, looks like you're going to Montana?" Because it was MO for the abbreviation for Missouri. And I guess he just wasn't too hip to the postal system. I wanted to go to Japan.
Whiteman Air Force Base is a United States Air Force base located just south of Knob Noster, Missouri, United States. The base is named for 2nd Lieutenant George Whiteman, who was killed during the attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1963, Whiteman AFB transitioned from being a bomber base to an ICBM missile base.
I think I arrived by plane, the C-130. There were a bunch of other guys. We all got off. There was an ambulance there, and I rode back to the hospital on the ambulance, met the hospital commander, and met the first sergeant, met some people that I'd be working with. And I was told, this is where you get started. This is where you you pay your dues. Toby was an African-American kid from Flint, Michigan. He was kind of a nerd in the way that I was a nerd. In the 6 years that I was on active duty, I completed my bachelor's degree in psychology, and Toby was real mathematically gifted. He was taking these heavy-duty physics, calculus, all these high-level math classes. I wasn't a big drinker. He wasn't a big drinker. My dad had a problem with alcohol. as did his 6 brothers. It seemed like we had a lot in common. I was newly married, and he was newly married. His wife and my wife became friends. On our days off, we would barbecue, we'd play cards, we'd do something fun. You know, some people you just sync with and some people you don't. I think we worked very well together. So Toby said to me, I remember his exact words were, "Hey man, I got an idea, let's go camping." And I laughed at him like, "Camping? Where'd you get this from?" Because I would bet money he'd never been camping. I knew that I'd never been camping. He told me that he ran into a guy who was a fisherman. He liked to fish. And he says, "You know, this is a really cool place. You guys ought to check this out." So Toby was the one that was really insistent that we go down to Devil's Den.
Devil's Den State Park is a 2,500-acre Arkansas state park in Washington County, near West Fork, Arkansas in the United States. The park was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps beginning in 1933.
So, but Toby brought up a good point, and that is, you know, isn't a road trip, isn't a journey part of the adventure? You know, it's like, let's get off this base, let's get away from this stuff for a while. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do. Toby and I planned this out meticulously. We each knew what the other was going to bring. My responsibility was the camp lantern, hand axe, and Toby's main responsibility was the tent. White Chevy Impala, I don't know, 68 or something. It was certainly built for the road. It wasn't built for the terrain that we were headed for. Toby would play something by the Commodores, soul music. We had a portable 8-track. And I'll say, all right. And then we'd listen to, you know, Beatles or something that I liked. It looked beautiful. We dodged the kiosk because we weren't going to buy a camping car. We drove through a paved section of the park to kind of like a northwest corner. You know, we knew we were trespassing. And there's a chain across the road. Toby's like, "No, man, I got this. I'll handle this." So he hops out of the car, picks up the chain and drops it. We crested the top of this plateau. We were both just blown away. There were late blooming wildflowers all over the place and birds. The grass was 8 inches tall. It was just beautiful. The evening started really about 6 o'clock p.m. We set up our campfire. And, you know, we did kind of the normal fun stuff you would do if you were camping for the first time in your life. Burn hot dogs and, you know, marshmallows and enjoy the roar of the fire. Sounds of the forest that are natural. Tree frogs, crickets, bugs that make noise were loud enough that we had to raise our voice a bit just to talk across the campfire. And I noticed that it got suddenly silent. I mean, absolutely silent. And we lost the breeze. This is the time that Toby has his head turned to the right, and he's looking at something on the horizon. I said, "Hey, what are you looking at?" Then he asked me, "Hey, Terry, were those lights there before?" His torso was in the way, so I had to stand up. And on the western horizon, there were 3 lights in a triangular shape. While we're watching, this triangle rotated about 120 degrees and aligned the base of the triangle parallel to the horizon. I said, you know, maybe it's an aircraft or a couple of aircraft headed right toward us, and we're not seeing the motion of the aircraft because we're right in its path. And I said, let's watch it for a minute or two and it'll deviate. And we felt this sensation of calm wash over us. and then it tilted down. And then it started like a glide plane downward. The apex of the triangle was pointed right in our direction. We watched it, and it seemed like it was distant and far away, and then it wasn't, and then it wasn't, and then it wasn't, and then it wasn't, and then it wasn't. It flew in, and we watched it move across the treetops, and these bright lights have just lit everything up like crazy. I was trying to reason it out, and I knew that as a kid I saw flying saucers a couple times. When I was 7 or 8, in my backyard playing, the neighborhood went kind of quiet, kind of like I put my hands against my ears. The sounds were muffled, and I looked straight up, and here's this silver disc that was maybe 30 feet in diameter, and I didn't see a seam or a bolt, and I thought, but wow, it was like looking at a new car. It's like a sports car on a showroom floor, and I thought it was beautiful. So I thought, aliens, flying saucers. This is not a saucer. I don't know, it might have been 2,700 feet. And it looked like a machine, like something that bolted together. And my thoughts going back were, what am I seeing? I said, Toby, man, you're the guy that likes astronomy and likes the stars. Is this thing like in our atmosphere, or did this thing come from somewhere else? And he said, man, I don't know. So the thing is about 3,000 feet over our heads. And I felt sleepy. Yeah. Toby didn't say anything. He just picked up his air mattress, went over to the tent, threw it in, and fell on top of it. And I did the same. And I was out. I mean, I was out. There's a screen in back of the tent, and but I could see flashes of light. And my thought was, Toby was wrong. The bugs never did come back. But I really don't care now. I went to sleep. And then the next thing that I remember was a flood of lights that came through the canvas of the tent. And they were yellow and greenish and white. And don't have my wits about me. I'm like, where am I? Oh yeah, we're camping. That's right, camping with Toby. I thought that it was a park ranger's truck there to kick us out. I thought that those were like the overhead lights. And it was really dark in the tent, except for when these lights would go off, and then it would be illuminated like crazy for a millisecond. I sat up, and I noticed that my boots were untied, unlaced almost all the way down. And I knew I didn't do that. So I take my boots off, and my socks are on sideways. And that confuses me. I'm like, I don't understand. I know I didn't do that. So I take them off, I put them back on properly, I put my boots on, laced them up, and Toby was on his knees looking through the flap of the tent. And I said, Toby, man, what are you looking at? And I pulled back the flap on my side of the tent, and I looked out, and I saw 12, maybe 15, what I thought were children, probably 3 foot tall. I said, Toby, man, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of the night? He said, Terry, look at them. They ain't little kids. Don't you remember they took us? And then there was a light came on from underneath this thing, dead center. A column of white light, 30 foot wide, 30 foot tall. These little guys turned their attention toward it, walked toward it, and they would walk in twos or threes. They would pixelate out, and they were gone. And then the next 2 or 3 step into the light, and repeat the process. And we watched until the last two guys pixelated out. The lights on the points of the triangle and switched from multicolor to all white. And we watched it take off, just lifted up in the air like a hot air balloon. And the higher it went, the faster it went. And we watched it till it was, 3 little points of light and then a single point of white light and then gone. Toby said, let's get out of here. Let's get in the car and go. I told him, I said, I ain't leaving this tent until it's daylight. I'm not sure they're gone. I felt that I'd be vulnerable if I ran to the car. Toby started to hyperventilate. And I said, man, you got to slow your breathing down. And he did, and he got control of that. He asked me for the 15th time, can't we go? It's your car. You're driving. Can't we go? Let's get out of here. I don't want to be here. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to be here either. So I grabbed my car keys. He grabbed his keys and his wallet. My wallet was already in my pants. We were both still dressed except for our shoes. So my boots are laced up, and we pulled back the flap of the tent, and we ran to the car. I hopped in, shut the door, and we hit all the locks. It was a 4-door car. And I turned on the overhead light. And I said, are we good? And he looks around and he says, no, there's nothing in here. There's no one in here. We left the tent. We left Toby's cooler. We left his backpack that had his name, address, and phone number written with an indelible marker on it. We took nothing. Then we hit Blacktop. And I felt good. I felt safer. And we headed north, headed back to the base. When we were driving back, we agreed on the story, and we didn't want to lie either. So we settled with, why don't we tell them that we woke up sick and just came home? Having worked in the hospital squadron, we saw this. We knew that this was true. If you went and said you saw a flying saucer, you went and said you saw aliens, especially being an enlisted man, they would send you out for a psychiatric evaluation and you'd be discharged. We were certain that's what would happen to us if we told a soul. For that 6.5 hours, whatever it was that we drove back, there really was no conversation between us. We had some injuries. We were both burned. I had like the worst sunburn I'd ever had in my life. It was under my armpits. It was everywhere in my body. Toby was just miserable. We just wanted to go to our respective homes. Pulled into base. It was around noon. Toby and his wife lived in NCO housing too. He was a couple blocks away from me. Our wives took us to the emergency room.
So can you give me a sense of arrival? You guys are going to your separate houses? Is that what happens? And what do you say to your wife when you see her?
I had my keys. I unlocked the door. I came in. And she's like, hey, you're back early. And then she's like, what happened to you? And I said, I don't know. I sat down and I was just terribly dehydrated. I just really, really, really needed something to drink. She came over and said, you look feverish. And she put her hand on my forehead and said, you're really hot. I think you had a temperature. So she goes and gets a glass thermometer and sticks it in my mouth, and I got 103.2 temperature. So she makes a tepid bath for me and has me soak in that, gives me some aspirin. She said, "How did you get burned like this?" The hospital squadron was small. It wasn't like a huge hospital. It was just, I don't know how many people were on the base at the time, but it wasn't like it is today. The doctor at the hospital, I recall, said, "Terry, what the hell, man? Were you put yourself on some kind of barbecue spit and have somebody rotate you? How did you get burnt like this? Why didn't you wear a shirt?" I'm like, "Doc, I never took my shirt off. I never took my pants off. I never took my boots off except to relace them." He doesn't understand the mechanics of what hurt me. That's what he couldn't wrap his head around.
So you say to the doctor, "We woke up sick." That's what you said?
I told him we went to bed, woke up, and we woke up just in pain. We woke up terribly sick. They interviewed us in separate rooms.
We should probably save that for the next one because that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah.